Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode here in the short season. I think what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about how you start evaluating compliance policies or working with compliance policies in your environment. And this first episode, because I keep them to 5 minutes apiece, is going to be around how to determine if your organization uses compliance policies today, specifically device compliance policies, because that's where this series is sort of focused on at the moment, to make sure that you don't break into jail or you don't have issues when you start testing these different features. So a couple different things that we need to investigate here. The first sort of thing that we need to investigate is we need to see what policies are in use by our organization today. So if you go to the home page here and you go to devices and go down to compliance policies, this will give you a list of compliance policies that are available and being used by your organization, right? So it's good to have take a look through here, see what's being used, because these are actively being used by your organization to flip that compliance bit on an actual device. So before you start, testing any settings or looking at any settings, you want to make sure that you understand the policies that are here. And if they don't make any sense to you or you've never seen them before, you have some homework to do to see what's going on. The second thing that you need to check out here is this setting that I have on the screen around marking devices with no compliance policy assigned as, and then you see in my tenant here, I have it set as not compliant. Okay, this is really important. If this is set to compliant, what this means is that any device that doesn't have a compliance policy is automatically marked as compliant. So if you just looked, for instance, at the last pane and you just look to see like, hey, am I using compliance policy? Doesn't look like it, but this setting is set in the way that's shown on the screen here. What can happen is that a conditional access policy may be created looking for device compliance. Everything's working fine because nobody's assigning any policy and this is marked, so everything's compliant. If you go in and you start trying to mess with some policy or you start trying to do some testing, what's going to happen is that conditional access policy is going to start enforcing it, and you might have some unintended consequences. So it's really good to check out this setting. In a perfect world, we want organizations to have this set to not compliant, so we want it to have it set here. And we want organizations to have at least a basic compliance policy, so that way we're doing some sort of measurement as a starting place, right? So we can get into more on that on the next episode, like how do I pick what I start for a first compliance setting, so on and so forth, or where do I start? That'll be the next thing. This episode is going to be focused on not breaking anything, which is great. So be aware of this setting. Make sure you understand, how this is working in your organization. Make sure you understand how this is working with the policies that you have defined in your organization, and that'll be really good. Now, all devices, regardless, all Intune devices, MDM enrolled devices, generate a compliance state regardless of if you assign policy to them or not. I mean, based on that default setting that you sort of saw. And that is written over to Azure Active Directory. Okay, so in Azure Active Directory, what I'm going to do here, I'm on this pane here. Let me come back to my conditional access policies. If you go to home, you go to the Azure portal, you may not have access to look at this, so you may need some help. But if I type in conditional access on the portal, you'll see I have Azure AD conditional access, and then I'll land on the overview page. Now, it's a good idea to come through here and see what conditional access policies you have in place and understand the strategy from the security and identity teams and maybe the device management teams, whoever manages it in your enterprise, on how they want to control conditional access before you start changing any compliance values. Because any values and things that you change could have an impact on resource access. So, you don't want to, be caught out of the gate before you even get started. What you're going to want to look for, I have multiple conditional access policies here, but what you're going to want to look for is you're going to want to look for policies that are turned on. So we have a simple filter here. I can do support state on and report only. There's two different states. So I can look and see what is turned on, and then I can look through these policies to see, what might be impacted by a device compliance value. Now, there's ways to do this, other ways to look at these in bulk, but if you're watching this video, your organization's probably just getting started with conditional access, so there probably aren't a lot of policies in here. So if I go into one of these, what you'll see here, is I can go through this in a broader video, but there's multiple different actions here. And what you want to look for is the grant control. Now this controls what needs to happen before I grant access. So the one that we are impacting here is require device to be marked as compliant, this setting here. So you want to look for policies that have that here. And if that is set, these policies are looking at that compliance attribute before on the device before it's allowing access to a resource. So before you go tampering with the compliance state of that device, you should take a look at that. The last thing you want to be aware of here is the multiple controls. And these multiple controls options allow you to do two things. Do I require all the conditions to be true, or do I require any of the conditions to be true? So that's an and or an or statement. So as I have it configured here, required one of the selected controls, my device would get through and be able to access resources if I MFA'd, or my device was compliant, or my device was hybrid edge or AD join. So it's important to look through this stuff and make sure that you know the impact before you start changing device compliance values. So that's it for today. Short blurb here. There's a lot more on compliance and conditional access. This is just, I want you to start looking around. Next episode, we'll look a little bit about like how we can select some low impact compliance settings to at least allow you to define a compliance baseline. Thanks everyone. Happy Friday. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.